Well, hello, and welcome to this, I call it Kyle Circle History class. Several months ago, I started a series of videos called The Democratic Deception of Black America. And I did several, and then I stopped because, I just like to live my life. But we're at a place in our nation where I feel compelled by the Spirit of God to share the knowledge that I acquire and the things that the Spirit of God presses me to release. So these next several videos will be fairly quick. My goal is to give information to help people, specifically people of color, in the African American community and the African American church. Okay? So this particular video, we're going to look at just the origins. And remember this phrase, the fruit is in the roots. Anytime something is established and formulated, it will always have a spiritual entity that will be attached to a person that then perpetuates an ideology and a value and a belief. Okay? That value from the originators they will shape the way that fruit, the roots of that thing are developed and established and how they grow. Now, what do I mean by that? So what we're going to talk about is how the roots of the Democratic Party were formulated, how they were established, and how the fruit that you are seeing today is attached to a spiritual origin. Okay, so everything that happens has a spiritual origin. So I'm not really talking to people who are not people of faith, who are not people of spiritual wisdom, because I know they're not going to really be shaped after some of the truth. But quite honestly, this particular election in November will likely be the last time the African American vote will have a substantial impact upon what happens in this nation. Now, the next thing is there are a couple of things that you need to know. Why am I doing these videos? Because we are contending for a window of time to continue the development and the release of the gospel so the gospel can be spread. So we're fighting for that window. That's why this election is so important. We're fighting to keep the laws in place, the foundational elements in place that will allow us to spread the gospel. Now, the gospel will be preached. What we're contending for is how we are going to perpetuate that gospel. And what happens in this election will determine the degree of difficulty, the degree of hardship, and or the degree of civil liberties that we have enjoyed this nation that will let us continue. Now, the reason this particular segment that I'm teaching now is important is that the fruit of what you are about to step into in this election is predicated on the roots of the origins of the Democratic Party. And the African Americans have been sold a bill of goods about the Democratic Party that's just not true. So when you go out and you see African Americans pulling down statues and telling people you got to tear this down, what you don't understand is the very party that you are privy to, that you have been bought into, is the Democratic Party that erected the statues you tearing down. So the statues that you fighting about and arguing about were developed by the root of the party that you're a part of. So it's like somebody coming into a house telling everybody to tear everything down, and the house that you're tearing down was built. You built it. Okay? The statues that you're tearing down, the Democratic Party erected them. Now let's look at the history. Okay, I want to break this up. Let's look at the history of the Democratic Party, and this is for African Americans. I'm talking to African American faith leaders. Okay, the Democratic Party. So let's go, and I'm pulling my information. I'm going to share the links where I got this information. When the original parties were formulated, there was something originally called the Republican Democratic Party. There was a split between the Republican Democratic Party during the Reconstructive era. Okay, the era when the slaves were being freed, the Emancipation Proclamation, there were two factions. There was one faction that were saying, we want to keep our slaves, we want to fight for our slaves, we do not want to let them go. We don't. Okay, so you got two factions. Now let's look at who those leaders were. Okay, the original leaders of the Democratic Party, some of them, and this is coming from the Smithsonian Institute. There were Horatio Seymour. Okay, in 1868, Horatio Seymour was the Democratic nominee for the New York governor for president, and Francis Preston Blair. Okay, this was a representative from. Now these are Democratic leaders. We're talking about the fruit is in the root. So if you're African American, talking about you Democratic, how you fighting for the Democratic Party and how you want to support Joe Biden, what I want to challenge you is to understand that there was a spirit that formulated this party, and the spirit that formulated this party didn't go away. The same spirit that established these values. So let's look at the history. The Seymour Blair ticket ran on a platform which supported national reconciliation and states' rights. They opposed reconstructions. They opposed black equality. They opposed black suffrage. So we're talking about the roots of the Democratic Party that you're saying you want to vote for. And I'm talking to African Americans, because the fruit of what you're living with today it comes from the root of what was established back then. Just because the Democratic Party has grown and evolved doesn't mean it's changed, because the spirit that helped formulate it is still there. Everything that happens in this earth realm has either a kingdom of God basis, which was formulated out of the heart and mind of God, or it has a demonic basis, which was the enemy is opposing the righteousness. And remember, I did a video the other day that says the United States will not go left. We're moving towards the righteousness of God. So the fruit is in the root. Let's continue. So we're talking about the origins of the Democratic Party. So in 1868, the Democratic nominees for New York Governor Horatio Seymour for president and Francis Preston Blair, they opposed black equality. They opposed black suffrage. Meanwhile, the Republicans had their ticket. And so the Democrats opposed Reconstruction and allowing African slaves who had just been freed from manifesting what the 14th Amendment gave them. Okay? So we're talking about the root. The fruit is in the root. And what's really fascinating is, as I was doing research, I went to the Smithsonian Institute and found a poster from that era. And I'm telling you guys, we need to know. You need to know what's going on. So this poster, which is dated, let me just put the date on it. I'll share the link. It's got Seymour. It's got and we're talking about the four key leaders of the origins of the Democratic Party that you're fighting for right now, black folk. I'm just talking to my people, okay? And this is what it says. Remember, the fruit is in the root, okay? A tree is known by its fruit. So when you look at the fruit of the Democratic Party today, what do you see? You see rioting. You look at the Democratic leadership in Washington State. You look at Portland. You look at Seattle. You look at the Chaz. We're talking about the fruit, okay? The fruit is in the root. So let's look at that. Now, we're talking about the ones who originated the Democratic Party. They formed the ideology that is now built into the infrastructure of this party right now. And this is what he said in July 4th, 1863. This is what Seymour said in a speech in New York. He said, "Remember this, that the bloody and treasonable and revolutionary doctrine of public necessity can be proclaimed by a mob as well as by the government." So the root. So what was he perpetuating? He was saying the mob. Now, what did we just see in almost every major Democratic city across this country. New York, Minneapolis, Los Angeles. What did he say? We're talking, this was July 4th, 1863. Okay? The year before the slaves were freed. This was the Democratic nominee for president who was opposing. What did they oppose? They opposed black suffrage. They opposed Reconstruction. They opposed the rights of African Americans, of African slaves who had just been freed. So the root of the party that you are perpetuating and you are fighting for, and you're saying, Joe Biden, the fruit, baby, is in the root. A tree is known by its root. So I'm sharing this because you need to know. We, black folk, we need to know the truth. The fruit is in the root. So let me recap. I'm going to recap and then I'm going to end this segment because I got another segment. You need to know the origins of the Democratic Party that you are fighting for. This is where they came from. This is history. Now, I didn't just go to one source. I used the Smithsonian Institute. I use history.gov. I use Britannica Encyclopedia. Why? Because in today's economy, folk are so busy trying to rewrite history, they'll go back and try to change things around to make it suit the political establishment that's at play right now. So I want to make sure that you have sources. And I want to find, I say, Lord, give me wisdom. Show me where to go. So the poster that I'm referring to was from 1863, July 4th, and it was a speech that Seymour, who was the original presidential candidate for the Democratic Party in 1863. And he was perpetuating even then the mob mentality that destroys. And so if we can, in other words, it's saying, if you won't give us what we want, we're going to tear everything up. That's the spirit that's attached to what we are seeing right now, because the fruit is in the root. So you got to go back and establish where did the root of this thing begin. It began with the founders of the Democratic Party back in 1863. So pastor, teacher, biblical leader who's telling people you need to, how much you hate Trump. Do you understand that this is the issue? The stuff that we're seeing, do we wear a mask? Do we not wear a mask? All of that is a distraction to get you distracted and off focus. The fruit is in the root. So let me recap. For this first little segment, we're talking about the democratic deception of African America while you going around to tearing down bridges and telling people to pull down statues and renaming streets and do all that. The very party, if you're gonna tear down the statues, just like that Republican senator said, if you're gonna tear down statues, you need to rename the Democratic Party and call it what it is. Because the fruit is in the root. The fruit of the Democratic Party goes back to four leaders: Wade Hampton, Horatio Seymour. Let me pull up the other two. Wade Hampton, Horatio Seymour. I'm gonna stop right there because that was the vice president and the presidential candidate in 1863. The first candidates for the Democratic Party, which is the same Democratic Party that exists today. So the fruit is in the root. I'll be back with another segment after this.